Instead, we have the opportunity to make a habit of empathy, to recognize ourselves and each other.
Well, I'm Rita Marie Johnson. I'm the founding director of the Razor Foundation, which is a foundation in Costa Rica. And we've been working since 1998 and now are in the public schools in Costa Rica teaching a practice called Be Peace that evolved over many years, really, out of my experience and my quest for how we embody peace. How can we embody peace in a consistent way? I was looking for a way to feel peace and to speak peace so that I could be peace, and that's why I named the practice Be Peace. We also have a nonprofit organization here in the U.S. that is called Razor Foundation International. So I have lived and worked in Costa Rica for 17 years, and now I'm coming home. Now I'm turning my attention to the need for peace in the U.S. Not that I'm leaving Costa Rica behind. I'm still the director of the foundation in Costa Rica and will continue to support our Academy for Peace there. But I find that I really want to be of service to my own country at this time.
Oh, that's great. As you know, I'm exploring the topic of empathy, kind of what's the nature of empathy and the stories of empathy. And I was wondering, how does your work relate to the value of empathy? How does it inform your work?
Well, empathy is at the heart of the practice of Be Peace. In teaching Be Peace, we teach two aspects. One is coherence within, because in order to feel peace, it's really important that we have a sense of inner order, of being in sync, at peace with ourselves. And so we teach how to feel peace, and then we teach how to speak peace. And until we really understand how to put ourselves in the shoes of the other, we're not able to speak peace. We don't have a way to really connect with their experience unless we know how to put ourselves into that experience. And so as part of the practice of Be Peace, we teach people how to respectfully guess the feelings and needs of the other. And as they guess those feelings and needs in a respectful way, with a coherent heart, carrying that message, then the experience is empathy. So it's at the very heart of what we teach. And out of that empathetic connection, then we know that compassion emerges, that it is easy to find compassion within ourselves when we've learned how to connect through empathetic language.
So looking over the kind of the arc of your life from childhood to where you are now, if you kind of just followed your life, how has your view of empathy evolved? For example, was your family very empathetic, and did you learn it at home, or how did that evolve?
Well, actually I would say that my family experience was not one that had a lot of spoken empathy. I always felt loved, but our connection through language, I would say, was not very empathetic, because the value in our family was to be self-sufficient, was to be responsible, to be respectful of each other, but it wasn't really about connection. And so I had to find my answers to how to connect in other ways. And actually my culture too in the U.S. was very achievement-oriented. It wasn't based on an intention to connect with other people. It was based on how can we achieve the most in the least time. And so because of that, I needed to leave my experience, in a sense, here in the U.S. and travel to Costa Rica, a country that identified with peace. Costa Rica abolished their army in 1948. And the moment that I heard that, a light went on in my heart that has never gone out. And so I went to Costa Rica with the idea that I would love to contribute to strengthening their national model of peace, but also to learn from them. Just to learn, how is it that they came to this decision, and how is it that they're continuing to develop this national identity with peace? And when I traveled to Costa Rica and got to know the culture, one of the things I came to realize is the primary value in that culture is connection. It's not achievement. And so, being very well programmed for achieving, I had a lot to learn. I had to really open up to an understanding of connection. First, I got the new sort of experience by just realizing that people put a real value on their friendships, on social time, on connecting, that people were out in the streets in Costa Rica talking to each other. You know, when I traveled down my street, the kids were in the street, the people were there hanging out, talking to each other, and that hadn't been my experience in the U.S. And so I just came to realize, wow, these people are really connecting more. And then I worked at the United Nations University for Peace for 2.5 years. And I had the opportunity while working there to learn about all different kinds of models of conflict resolution. And I learned a lot, and I valued that. However, I noticed that still, despite all these models of conflict resolution, that something wasn't bringing the people to a place of real connection. They might have found a win-win solution. That's a good thing. It's certainly better than killing each other. But finding a win-win solution today doesn't necessarily mean that we've built a connection that's lasting. And so I saw relationships still breaking down all the time around me. As I worked at the University for Peace even, I saw need for connection. And so then I was introduced to Marshall Rosenberg's model, nonviolent communication. And I was so interested in that because I had already found my method for feeling peace, but what I was missing was this way to connect through language. How do we speak peace in a way that connects us? So I went to Puerto Rico and I took a 9-day training with Marshall. And once I began to really grasp the essence of his model, I realized it was empathy. It was empathy through connection to the universal needs that we all share. That I have a need for respect and belonging and emotional safety, love, consideration. All these universal needs are in me, are in all the human beings on the planet. And when I realized that we could name these needs and connect through empathetic language, empathy being respectful guessing of feelings and needs, then I realized that this could be done, this could be practiced, that we didn't have to be stuck in disconnections all the time, in conversations that really ended up not getting us to where we wanted to go in terms of being able to share at a deep level. And so I was thrilled to find Marshall and to connect with him personally, and also to understand his model and the essence of it being this connection, this empathy, and actually being able to do it by respectfully guessing feelings and needs.
So that was the first time you started using the word empathy and kind of being aware of it was in Marshall's workshop?
Well, I was aware of the word before, but I can't say I really had a clue how to do it. I mean, just as a person with intentions for peace, most of my life, I really decided at the age of 10 I wanted to work for peace. But until I found Marshall's model, I didn't have a clear how to. I was yearning to find that how to. And I believe that a lot of people are also yearning for that. They'd like to be able to be more peaceful, but they just don't know how. And so now we have a clear how to. Now we can do it. We know exactly how to do it.
Well, what happened at 10 years old that you started valuing peace, found that that was so important? Do you have a story of how that happened?
Yes, actually it was on the 4th of July. When I was 10 years old, I was sitting on our big front porch. We lived on a farm. We were sitting around, my sister, brother, and I, waiting for it to get dark so that we could do our sparklers and our fireworks. And I got bored sitting there, so I thought, oh, I'm just going to go take a walk. So I set off by myself down our country road, and the sun was setting. And I looked at that sunset, and my heart just burst open, and I I just felt so filled with this feeling of appreciation and of peace. I felt so peaceful, just at one with that sunset. And then my inner voice said to me very clearly, and you will work for peace. And actually, my 10-year-old mind said, but how can I work for peace and be married too? In other words, how can I have a husband and work for peace? And my sense of it inside was, don't worry, you're not going to be alone in this. And so I just knew clearly from that moment on that somehow I would work for peace. And so I came back. It was dark now. And I remember that I gave my sparklers away to my brother and sister, not because I didn't believe in sparklers anymore, but because I had so much inner splendor going on. I had inner sparklers. I really didn't need to do the sparklers anymore. And so right now in my life, since I feel called to come back to the U.S., I think about that moment when I was 10 years old, happening on the 4th of July. It really means a lot to me that in my country, sorry. Just take a breath. You're such a good listener.
You're such a good speaker.
Well, thank you. See if I can do this.
Well, it really touched something deeply.
Yeah.
Then that piece is something that's like very deeply the beauty of it, and
the beauty of the piece that day, and the fact that that experience for me happened on the 4th of July is deeply meaningful for me, because I know that my country stands for freedom, and I know that my country can also stand for peace. And that's the awareness that I want to bring back to my country now. After having been gone for 17 years, I want to bring back the know-how of peace. In the U.S. we've had the know-how of freedom. We have a constitution, we have laws. We've had the know-how of freedom, and people around the world have rejoiced in that. They have respected the United States because of our laws and our diversity and our human rights here and the way that we've modeled freedom. But freedom needs peace in order to be just. And so it's really important to me that we also bring the understanding of how to personally practice peace and how to practice it as a nation.
So that's something that America could be as well. It's like a place of beauty and peace. So
exactly, a place of beauty and freedom and peace.
And since I'm working on a documentary on empathy, how does the role of empathy fit into that?
The idea of a nation at peace?
And a nation of peace, empathy, and beauty. And I kind of see it as a nation of empathy as well, because there does seem to be a deep reservoir of empathy within the country that needs a voice somehow to. And so how do we bring
ourselves from where we are, where we know that there's empathy under the surface that needs to be evoked, that needs to be expressed? Well, actually, in our teaching of Be Peace, we are in the process of developing Be Peace hubs in the U.S., and the idea of these Be Peace hubs is to bring this practice of peace into the school system. And as we do that, we're teaching 5 different activities in the classroom that will help the students be able to practice empathy on a daily, weekly basis. And in these activities, they are repeated each week. So it's not just a curriculum, it's a practice. It's being immersed in empathy every day. And we know that when we are immersed in empathy, we change. We learn how to express ourselves in ways that are considerate of the needs of the other, because through empathy, we put ourselves in the other person's shoes. And so it's just more natural to be respectful than of the other person because we're so well connected. We really get what they're going through. And so when we are able to practice empathy every day in a school system where the teachers know how to embody empathy, they teach it to the students, then we're going to see problems like bullying melt away. We're going to see problems like students committing suicide because of the pressures that they feel. We're going to find those will melt away because empathy will help everyone to feel that they belong to one another. And as we realize that we belong to one another and we learn how to express that belonging through empathetic words, then we no longer have a need for tragic strategies like bullying and suicide. Those just melt away in the face of this delicious feeling of connection that we get through empathy.
And it seems to be about a sense of inclusion and people feeling like they're part of.
That's so true. It's so important that people feel that they're a part of. And I believe one of the mistakes that we've made in our U.S. school system is to make schools so big. I do believe that we can get connected through empathy even in large numbers. It's possible to do that, but it's certainly more challenging. That if we don't know how to connect in small groups, that it's even more difficult to connect when we have a mass of students. And so the students end up feeling very alone and like they don't belong and that they're disconnected. And so it would be my preference to go back to smaller schools. I actually grew up in a farming community where we had a one-room schoolhouse that I went to for 1st through 5th grades. And it was the best education I ever got. There were 18 of us in the school of different ages, and we were very well connected. We really knew each other. And so I can't imagine that bullying or suicide would ever have taken place in that kind of environment.
Well, you kind of touched on one of my questions is how can we go about kind of at a national level building a culture of empathy? And one of your approaches is to have this practice that you're describing of be peace, but kind of in the overall view, what can we do to kind of shift to this culture that supports empathy?
Well, one of the things that we've done in Costa Rica, let me say that word again. Well, one of the things that we've done in Costa Rica that has been successful in building a culture that is conducive to empathy is that besides teaching this personal practice of peace called Be Peace in the school system, and besides building a grassroots movement in the school system where we've got teachers and parents and students learning empathy through this practice of Be Peace, we also have initiated a ministry for peace in Costa Rica. In 2006, we initiated a bill for a ministry for peace, and through my foundation there, we worked for 3 years. And finally, in August of 2009, our Ministry for Peace bill passed in Costa Rica. And in that same time period, we formed an alliance of nonprofit organizations for peace in Costa Rica because we knew that if we were going to build this new culture of peace or culture of empathy, that we needed to get everyone on the same page, understanding what it means to practice peace. And so through this alliance of nonprofit organizations, we now have the government as the Ministry of Peace facilitating this alliance so that they're working together on a national plan for peace promotion. And in that national plan for peace promotion, we will have the practice of peace so that it becomes authentic, so it's not just infrastructure on the outside, but that it's based on this practice of peace, this practice of empathy, so that everyone can learn how to pass that skill from one generation to the next, so that we have a lasting peace based on empathy. So in Costa Rica, just to summarize, now we have a national model that is inside out, bottom up, top down, and all around, so that we have this working national model of peace infrastructure. And so I believe that we need to teach it from the inside out, but we also need countries that are set up for peace, that are set up through peace infrastructure that reinforce those values, that actually make it possible to teach all the citizens how to practice peace.
Well, now you're coming back to the United States and wanting to bring this work here. And how do you see kind of moving forward in building that culture of peace and empathy here?
Mm-hmm. Well, we actually have two different paths that we're going down as a way to contribute to peace and empathy here in the U.S. One is that we want to train all of the would-be teachers that are in universities, learning to be teachers. We want to take our Be Peace Foundations course into universities and be able to offer it for credit for teachers that are becoming, or for students that are becoming teachers. And we've already had success with this in Costa Rica at the United Nations University for Peace. This last January, we were able to teach our 40-hour Be Peace Foundations course to 26 students from 16 countries. And the University for Peace offered 2 graduate credits for our course. So this was the first step in getting this kind of teaching into universities. So then once the teachers learn these peace skills as part of their university degree, they can go into the field and know exactly how to be empathetic in the classroom and how to teach the students empathy as well. And then our other path is to develop these Be Peace hubs. In a Be Peace hub, we will have a hub director who has learned the practice of Be Peace, which teaches empathy. And they will present a 3-day training to teachers in a school. And in that training, they will teach the teachers what to offer in the classroom, these 5 activities that I spoke of earlier, to the students. And so as we have the hub, and the hub teaches the teachers, and the teachers teach the students, and also the parents. The teachers will be teaching the parents of their students this practice, that we feel certain that through the school system that we will be able to shift the U.S. toward peace. Now, another thing that we're doing in Costa Rica and that we'd also like to do in the U.S. is training leaders. In Costa Rica, with our new Ministry of Peace there, our Academy for Peace in Costa Rica wants to offer leadership training. We want to offer this training to leaders in government, in nonprofit organizations, and in business. So we'd like to be the training arm for leaders through the Ministry of Peace in Costa Rica. And we'd also like to do the same kind of leadership training in the U.S. so that we get not only the bottom-up factor with the grassroots teaching in the school system, but that we also teach the leaders so that they support this effort and that we're coming at it from both directions, bottom-up and top-down. And actually, one of the ideas that we have for moving the practice of empathy and peace forward in our world is to teach presidents and their families the practice of peace. This idea actually came from the Dalai Lama. I understand that at one of the Dalai Lama's gatherings, a big conference on compassion, that he was asked by someone in the media that if he could develop one project in the world for peace, what would it be? And his idea was to bring the presidents and their families to a vacation destination and teach them peace. Well, in Costa Rica, at our headquarters, we have an international training center. And so our dream is someday to bring presidents and their families to our vacation destination of Costa Rica and teach them the practice of Be Peace.
Well, Barack Obama has talked a lot about empathy. What's been your impression about what he said?
Well, it's been music to my ears to hear him articulate the need for empathy and to name the problem that we have in the U.S. as an empathy deficit. I agree with him wholeheartedly on that point, and I also believe that we know exactly how to meet that deficit. We know how to do that more clearly than we know how to meet the budget deficit. It's actually easier to know exactly what to do to become an empathetic nation, how to teach it in our schools, how to teach it to our leaders. We have the know-how of peace now. We don't need to be in confusion any longer. We don't need to be fuzzy about how to teach peace. We have the know-how right now. And part of the know-how, besides the connection that we experience through empathetic language, is what we call coherence. And this has come from the research of the Institute of Heart Math. Coherence is an ordered pattern inside ourselves, an ordered pattern where we experience this coherence between the heart and the brain. And as we learn how to get into coherence reliably, consistently, efficiently, then we are able to feel peace consistently and reliably as well. And so we know that it's very challenging to express empathy through language if we're not feeling it right here in our hearts. And so by learning this method of coherence from the Institute of Heart Math, we are able to get to a feeling of peace faster. When someone is, for example, saying angry words in our face, we can learn how to hold this feeling of peace in our heart by practicing coherence. And then as we're able to hold that feeling of peace, then we are able to come forth with empathetic language that is in sync with what's going on inside us, so that our heart, our vibration of peace, and our language is all in sync as we connect with another person's experience. And we know that as we're coherent and connected to our own feelings and needs, that we impact the coherence and connection that's experienced on the other side of that, that's experienced by the person that we're having the conflict with. So, in other words, as we learn to feel and speak peace and embody peace, we are teaching peace just by being that everyone around us is impacted by our ability to embody peace. And when it comes to coherence, we know that we project an electromagnetic field up to 6 feet beyond our bodies. And as we do that and we are coherent, what we are projecting is a coherent energy field. And so others up to 6 feet around us are impacted by that. And that is one of the most hopeful pieces of scientific information today. Because if I can impact your coherence and how peaceful you feel simply by being coherent myself, then I can send out this wave of peace to you. And then you send it out to the next person, and the next person, and the next person. So if we all knew how to do this, we could send a giant, beautiful tsunami of coherence, like this giant wave of coherence around the planet that is actually measurable. The Institute of Heart Math now has 3 sensors that measure the electromagnetic field of the Earth, and that as human beings are either incoherent or coherent, we impact the Earth's electromagnetic field and how coherent it is. And so just imagine if we teach people how to feel this peace in their hearts so that they can come from empathy and come from this desire to connect, and we send that out into the world, we know that it can impact people who are even deeply programmed for fear and hate. That as we send out this wave of coherence, and as people feel a sense of belonging at the unconscious level, even without language, that they're going to be better human beings. They're going to have better impulse control, they're going to be more peaceful, and they will never know what hit them. It's this invisible electromagnetic field that we're building that, that affects us whether we realize it or not.
Well, a lot of people I've interviewed about empathy, they'll talk about presence. So it sounds a little bit like you're talking about the sense of presence and kind of being there. Is that true?
That's exactly it. And when we talk about presence and in relation to coherence, what the Institute of Heart Math research has helped us do is know exactly how to get to presence. When we're coherent, we are present. We're feeling peace and we're present to ourselves and to the people around us. And so when we carry that within ourselves, then it works when we when we happen across it, but just imagine if we can do it at will, that we can be in that sense of presence at will, in a very reliable, consistent, efficient way. Now, none of us are in presence all the time or at peace all the time. And what coherence does is help us when we fall off the peace train or fall off what we could call presence. What coherence does, it helps us to know exactly how to get back on faster and faster and faster, so that we don't need to spend hours or months or sometimes sadly years being disconnected from ourselves, disconnected from others, in confusion and conflict. Now we have the how-to. We can be confident in exactly how to get back to that sense of presence and empathy with others.
One thing I like to look at is stories and anecdotes. So do you have some about having experienced empathy that you talked about the childhood at 10 years old, how you had the awareness of connection and beauty, it sounded like, with all of life perhaps, but in terms of dealing with, interacting with people and other moments, kind of high points like that, that related to, you know, connecting with people through empathy. Mm-hmm. Do any other stories come to mind?
Well, actually, you asked me when I first became aware of empathy, and I would say my first teacher of what empathy really is was Surah Hart. Surah is a certified nonviolent communication trainer, and she came to the University for Peace to introduce the idea of nonviolent communication. And in my role there, I was working there, I set her up to be able to share that with several key people at the university. And so she talked to us about what empathy was. But then I had some time with her afterwards, and I was going through a very difficult situation in my life. And it was a situation that I had shared with several close friends and with my husband. And so I'd shared it frequently, but I'd never really come to a point of clarity or resolution about it. So I shared this situation with Surah, and she immediately began to give me empathy and to guess my feelings and needs. And as she did that, I realized, first of all, that she was hearing me differently than anyone else in my life, even people I was close to. That she was hearing me in a way that was so helpful, so connecting in guessing what my feelings and needs were. She was helping me get connected to me. And as a result of that conversation, I made a big change in my life. And I got clear on what I needed to do, and I did it, all as a result of her empathetic listening. So that was the turning point for me with empathy.
Do you remember a little bit about what happened, like how the conversation went?
Well, all I remember is that I was frustrated with a situation in my job. And as she listened to me and she named that what I was really wanting to do was to contribute on another level, that I was just yearning to contribute what I knew I could contribute. And as she helped me to name that, I knew that the strategy I was using at that time to contribute was never going to fly. I needed to give up that strategy and move to something different. And so that's how she helped me to get clear and to make the decision I needed to make that has actually resulted in me being here with you today. It was a key decision in my life to strike out on my own and to form this foundation and to begin to teach what I knew was mine to teach. I remember one mediation that I participated in that we had a nonviolent communication trainer actually participating in this mediation. And one of the things that didn't go well in that mediation is that this particular trainer wanted a certain strategy, that this trainer got attached to a certain strategy for coming to resolution. And as a result, the mediation took a very long time, and it was painfully difficult to resolve because of getting attached to one strategy. And afterwards, this trainer realized that this is what had happened, and said, I really learned something here. You know, I really learned that we've just got to stay focused on the connection and not get attached to any certain strategy. And that's really what empathy is all about, is just stay with that connection. And out of the connection, real compassion will emerge, and also the right strategies will emerge, strategies that meet everybody's needs. But if we get attached to the strategy on the front end, it blocks the empathy. And so that was a big learning for me and for that trainer, that in getting attached to a strategy, we're looking at the wrong outcome. The outcome needs to be connection, and then from that, all kinds of good words and acts and agreements can flow.
You have more stories like that? Those are really nice stories.
Well, just in terms of giving empathy, there's one story that stands out. When I was in Costa Rica participating in one of our student mediation trainings, it's an all-day training. It's a 6-hour training with 5th grade students. And in this particular training, the students arrived in the morning, and I noticed one 5th grader who was really restless. He was kind of poking other students and just had a hard time settling down. And I just could notice that he was just incoherent, you could say. You know, he wasn't tuned in. He wasn't able to listen, and I just observed this. So one of the first things that we do in our trainings with the students is we teach them coherence through biofeedback. So each student has the chance to put an ear sensor on, and then they see on the screen their heart rate variability pattern. And we teach them, we coach them into coherence so that they then become peaceful, that they learn what it means to get to that feeling of peace. And so this little boy, his name was Jose, experienced this, and he became more peaceful then. He saw that he had the power to choose to feel more peaceful. And then as the day went on, I noticed that he began to be able to listen, and he was just more tuned in. He was getting a lot of empathy through the activities that we did, and he was becoming more connected to himself. So at the end of the day, in the final activity, which is where we actually teach them how to be mediators, I went up to him and I asked him if he'd had any conflict in the last week in his life. And he said yes, that he had actually failed an exam, and he was so angry, he went out on the playground and he pulled a little girl's hair, and he pulled her all the way across the playground by her hair. So I said, well, okay, let's begin there. And so first I helped him to move into a state of coherence again. I helped him to get to that feeling of peace. And then I started guessing his feelings and needs and just giving him empathy. And I guessed that he felt really angry, as he'd said, and also really discouraged about having failed that exam. And as I talked to him, it turned out that he'd failed many, many exams, and that he was really feeling despair over this, feeling like he would never be anybody because failing all these exams. And then I explored more of his feelings and his needs, his need for belonging and connection to the other classmates in the school and to his teacher, and that he was feeling lonely and just really needing to connect and to belong. And as I named that need, his need for belonging and connection, a big tear slid down his cheek. And I knew then that he was connected to his feelings and needs now, that he didn't have the same disconnect that caused him to go and pull this little girl's hair. So I asked him, I said, Jose, now that we've processed this event in your life, I said, next time you have a challenge with an exam, do you think you're going to still feel the need to go and pull someone's hair just to release the anger? And he said, no. He said, now I know how to find my feelings and my needs. And so it was like a light bulb for him. This empathetic experience and getting connected to his feelings and needs helped him to be able to own them. So now he wouldn't have to project them as violence. So I know that these little experiences of empathy go a long way, that they go deep in us. They change us, they transform us. And so I'm sure that Jose's going to need more empathy in his life. But he learned that day what was possible. And I'm sure that he'll build on that and be able to become a citizen who can contribute to society instead of being violent.
It sounds like what you're trying to do is replicate that experience everywhere with all children.
That's exactly it. We are definitely looking to replicate. As a matter of fact, when I first was deciding what to do in my work in Costa Rica, I was inspired by a person who had a dream about making copies of the poem Razur. The poem Razur is what our foundation is named for, and that poem tells a story of a peace teacher who teaches the children of Costa Rica how to connect to their wisdom and their compassion. And he is a very empathetic teacher. And so in this dream, the idea was to multiply these peace teachers, to make copies of peace teachers. And so I named our foundation, the Razur Foundation, based on this poem and based on the idea of replicating peace teachers. That, for example, we have the date coming up in 2010, October 10th, 2010. We have 10, 10, 10. And 10 is the number of multiplication. That's what this dream was about back in Costa Rica so many years ago, was the idea of making copies, 10 times 10 times 10. And so we want to do that. Actually, we're thinking about an event on October 10th, 2010, to symbolize the replication of peace on planet Earth and to empower peace teachers to replicate, to make copies. Let's get peace moving out as a huge wave on our planet.
Well, you talked about making peace as a wave, which is a bit of a metaphor. And I like to explore, play with metaphors a bit. And do you have a metaphor that comes to mind about what is empathy like? If empathy was like a type of land or a type of animal or just anything like that, what is empathy like to you?
Well, for me, empathy would be like traveling down a beautiful path, a path that is filled with flowers, beauty. It's like traveling down this path to a friend's house. And as I'm traveling down this path, I arrive at the house of my friend, and together we get into a hot tub. And as we're in this hot tub, immersed together in this warm feeling, in this warm experience of connection, that we are both still individuals, but we're in this warm, kind of delicious experience of connection. And so for me, it's both the path and the destination, that it is the path to my friend's house that is filled with flowers, and it's a well-traveled path, a path that I know, it's a sure path to connection. This path is a path to that experience of being this warm feeling with my friend. So that's what empathy feels like to me.
And what would be a metaphor for the opposite of empathy?
Well, the opposite of empathy would be if there was this beautiful path, say this wonderful road in our human experience, a road where there are soldiers on either side of the road shooting at each other, that they're trying to kill each other, and consequently nobody can travel the path. It might be a beautiful path, but nobody can travel it because you're shooting at each other. You can't even get on the path because there's so much that is destructive, that is separating us, that is getting in the way of being able to travel that beautiful path to that wonderful destination of being connected together.
Well, sometimes I like to play with the metaphors in terms of them a bit of role playing. So if you have the metaphor of the beautiful path going, and then the path of the soldiers and fighting on both sides, what kind of a dialogue would they have with each other? What would the peaceful path say to the other path, and what would be the response? If you could take it a few steps back and forth.
Oh, what a wonderful exercise. Well, first of all, since the path to my friend's house is a path where we've ended up in the hot tub in this warm, delicious feeling together, if I saw that the path was now having the soldiers on both sides and fighting, I would invite my friend to step out of the hot tub, and we would go together, and we would begin, me on one side of the path talking to soldiers, and her on the other side of the path talking to the other side, and we would begin to give them empathy, guessing what their feelings and needs are about the issue, about why they're fighting with each other, trying to get to a place where they really can get what the need is. What is the need that you're fighting over? And then we would also explore their feelings and needs about what it really feels like to have to shoot at another human being. How does that feel for you? And do you have any unmet needs around that? So that we would help them get connected to their compassion for the other. And so as we would go deeper and deeper into empathy with these soldiers, guessing their feelings and their unmet needs, that we would help them get to a point then where they would be willing to, instead of shooting at each other, because it's a tragic strategy for getting their needs met, that we would invite them then into a mediation, and we would have them meet on the road. They would come together on the road, and we would lead them through a mediation where they could find other ways to get their needs met through positive strategies that enrich life rather than these tragic strategies that destroy life.
You'd totally transform it and that whole road.
That's right. We would do the mediation, and then we would open up the road for, everyone to be able to travel and enjoy the road, this sure path to connection and to a culture of empathy.
Okay, well that was, let me see what other questions I have here. If you were kind of exploring this theme of empathy, what questions do you have about empathy that you still want to kind of explore yourself? Like questions about the nature of empathy that are of interest to you?
Well, I actually have a very specific question. There's a research study that I'm longing for someone to do. There was a research study recently about subjects seeing an angry face, a picture of an angry face, and putting a name on that, like the name of a person. For example, they'd see a picture of an angry face and they'd put the name Mary. And as they did this, the researchers were measuring the reaction of the amygdala of the brain, and the amygdala is the part of our brain that gets triggered by past memories, like triggered by angry faces. We see an angry face and we go into alert and we're ready to attack back. And so they were measuring the amygdala of the brain, and the amygdala remained in reactive mode when they just put the name of the person, like naming a person Mary on an angry face. However, in the second group of subjects, they had the subjects name the emotion. And as they named the emotion, then the amygdala stopped reacting to a degree. And so the study that I would still like to see done is I would like to see a study where they give the subjects a context for the picture. That, for example, in this picture, the angry face is because this person didn't get invited to a party everybody else got invited and this person didn't get invited, and so they're angry. And so then the subject would need to guess what the feeling is on the face. They would see the angry face and put down the word anger as the emotion, but they would also guess the need to belong. That would be the unmet need. And so I'd like to know whether our amygdala completely ceases reacting when we guess both feelings and needs. Because that's the path that takes us to empathy. That's the sure path with the flowers on it that takes us to empathy. And so I'd love to see at the physiological level what happens to the reaction of the amygdala when we guess feelings and needs. I would like to just conclude by sharing my hope, a well-grounded hope. You know, in all of my experience of teaching peace, I have found that human beings have a heart's desire to be able to be a better person, to be able to be a more peaceful person. And I know in my own lifetime, from the age of 10, I was yearning to find a way to do that. I wanted to be a peacemaker, but I was really lacking the how-to. And so now, through the genius of people like Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, who's brought this wonderful model of nonviolent communication into our experience, and also the genius of Dr. Childra at the Institute of Heart Math, who has studied coherence and has helped us see that we can get reliably to that feeling of peace. It's as reliable as math. That's why he named it Heart Math, because it's reliable, consistent. We know how to do it. And so through the genius of these two men, we now know how to achieve a feeling of peace, and we know how to speak peace. So I am thrilled about that for myself and for others. I am thrilled to have the how-to of peace and to be able to teach it in a way that's replicable. And so I am filled with hope and with confidence that we now know how to do peace on earth, that we don't have to hold back. We don't have to just think that peace is an airy-fairy concept, that it's something that's unattainable. I believe peace is inevitable. I'm completely confident of that because I now can embody peace at will. That's not to say I'm peaceful in every moment, but when I'm not peaceful, I know how to get back to peace. And if I can do it, any human being can do it. So I know that we have what it takes to achieve peace on earth. And my hope is not just a hope that is, something that is elusive. No, it's grounded. It's grounded in science, it's grounded in experience, and it's grounded in the truth of who we are as human beings. It's within us, it's our essence, and now we know how to express that beautiful essence every day, in every moment. So I just want to share that hope and that confidence so that others can realize we can find our way home to peace. We can do it.